Hey, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. Today we are talking about how to scale your business using systems. My friend and former client, Kent Julian, is here. Welcome, Kent.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's always good to see you.
Oh, I'm so excited to kind of just catch up for my own personal knowledge in terms of what's going on with you lately. But talk to everybody, kind of give me a broad stroke of what your business looks like today. And then I kind of want to go back to a little bit in history just to find out about your beginnings.
Yeah, so my business has multiple streams of revenue. But the primary one, the one that I focus on the most is speaking. I probably do about 35 events a year. That's kind of my sweet spot, give or
Great.
take five. And when I say events, I look at it as going one place and working with one client is an event. So I might speak 2, 3 times. It might be a 3-day deal. It might be a keynote, but that's kind of how I categorize it.
And are you focused on serving the client beyond one speech? Like if they start by talking to you about one date and one keynote, are you able to transition that over to something that's a little bit more deep?
Yeah, I have been able to do that. I've been primarily a keynoter that does like breakouts or different things like that on the back end. However, COVID actually opened up a lot of those things for me. So I actually during COVID did some things that are evergreen and I continue to sell now. And so I'm able to sell those. And another thing that's really unique about me is I'm actually in I look at it as three different industries or three different markets. I started out as a youth speaker,
Right.
and I keep thinking I'm going to age out of that, and I never
It's not
do.
happening.
I connect so well, and they don't pay as well, but I just love them. I did one 2 weeks ago, and a small youth event is 1,500, 2,000. I do statewide events, so it's just great energy and things like that. So I do that, and that's probably about 40% of what I do, and I don't have to market that hard at all.
Right.
And then I do educators, but then I also do just I would call them service-oriented associations. So
Okay.
I'm working with a lot of government organizations, service or organizations, those kind of associations who I focus on.
Okay. What's your third? So you said youth
Youth
educators and
educators, and then I just call it service oriented associations.
love it, love it. And so since you probably were not thinking when you were a kid, hey, I'm going to grow up to become a motivational speaker or a professional speaker. What was going on in your world that even, how did you even get started?
So my former career was I was a youth pastor,
Okay.
and I did that for about 20 years, and it was a very interesting. I started out in a very small, very very small church and environment, and then by the time I was 26, I was in one of the largest churches at the time in the United States. So I made a pretty big jump, and I was speaking to, it depended on the week, but you're speaking to 200 to 500 students a week.
Mm.
So you're coming up with new stuff all the time.
Right.
And then I became the national youth director of a couple thousand churches. And that's right before you and I met. That's what I was doing
Yeah.
professionally. And that, I'm telling you, Jane, that was such a front row seat to what I do today and how I market, because as an executive director of an association, that's what it was. I was booking speakers and I was booking musicians all the time. And I found out this is the way, like once I started doing it, I don't want to do it like 90% of the people I had to work with. So I
Oh,
really got a front row seat of, and that's why today I focus on associations, because I did that for 7 years. So I really get the decision makers and the event planning side of it.
Beautiful. I'm happy to refresh on what you were doing. Did you or did you not, as a young person yourself, have like a learning disorder?
Yeah, good memory.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, good memory. I call it a learning challenge. I
Okay.
and I still have it today.
Okay.
So I, my teacher sat down with my parents when I was in third grade and said, "How in the world has your son gotten in third grade? He can't read." When I graduated high school, my SAT scores were so low I couldn't get into college. So I just had all those kind of challenges, and I had two people in particular, a basketball coach, and then also a English teacher that really impacted me and let me figure out that, hey, these things shouldn't hold you back and you just learn a little bit differently. And so I overcame that, I ended up getting into college on probation, and I graduated with honors, and I graduated my master's degree at the very top of my class. I like to say there were only two people in my class, but I was at the top. Uh,
I love that. But that makes me think that that's why you hang on to the youth market.
yeah, absolutely.
Because people in your life made such a difference.
Huge, huge.
And there's so many people out there who have challenges in learning. My grandson, he's getting ready to turn 15. He definitely has, he doesn't think like everybody else. And so
Right.
that I think that's nice for other people to hear, whether it be them or their children or grandchildren, that there is a way forward and you can graduate at the top of your
Yeah,
class.
absolutely. And it's really, I'll just say it's really interesting. I don't age out. And what has happened over the years is I had to go from being kind of the cool, hip speaker, which I'm definitely not anymore, to more of almost like a caring father figure. And what's interesting is I still share a real little bit about my story when I speak to youth, but it really takes a back seat. And now one of my daughters has had to overcome some of the things, and with the not learning challenges, but more of a physical challenge. And so she ends up becoming really the hero of my keynote to students. So it's
Um,
a really neat, really, really neat thing.
and it's very unique to you.
Yes. Yeah. No, yeah. Nobody can steal that
You're
stuff
not
to
the
me.
story, then think about who else could it be. What topic would you say is at the overarching of your umbrella of topics amongst your markets?
So when it comes to youth, it's definitely primarily motivation. That's what they're bringing me in for. I do some leadership training. So in the youth market, you do a lot of the speakers do general motivation, and then they're working with leadership level students. And so you do a little bit of that. When it comes to both educators and the associations I work with, it's all leadership and employee engagement.
I, I,
There, what's really interesting is some of the core things that I do, the concepts I teach, they're the same across the board. But with youth, it's more doing this personally with educators and with associations. It's also this personal development, but it's more about how do you get your teams buying into these concepts.
Now, when we were together, working together, you came up with this tagline, and it was something about either something in wine or show up and shine. What was the first part of that?
Check out and wine or show up and shine.
Check out
And
and wine or show up and shine. So it's kind of like an attitudinal thing, and you can take that through to any group, can't you?
totally. And my keynote for the all the educators, but especially these associations I work with when it comes to employee engagement, is totally about show up and shine. How do you bring your best to the job, and how do you pull the best out of your people?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
just want to make a statement here on the Wealthy Speaker podcast that motivational speaking is back in style. Like, there might have been a period of time where you probably didn't name yourself a motivational speaker, but I would like to say, and feel free to tell me otherwise, but I believe that motivational speaking is cool again.
It is, and especially if so. Here's what's really interesting. I love that you just said that. If your motivation actually has really good content,
Yeah.
that's the key. And what's really interesting is it's not just stories anymore.
Mm.
It's got to have good content, but if you overwhelm people with content, they don't have enough to take home with them. And so I just know for me, there's 2 or 3 or 4 things that set me apart. I always hear, boy, the word I use, they never use this word, but you are so playful with the audience. You make it fun. You make it enjoyable. I don't just tell stories. And COVID really helped me with this. I've really learned how to do some interactive stuff with slides and things that just it's almost like you're playing a game, and all the games I'm doing with them set them up for making them think about the main thing I'm going to talk about. And that's when I get in my content. And then my content is really, really solid. It's not just make you feel good. It's like, I can take this home and use it immediately.
So good. Application is key. So I think the reason why motivational speakers went out of style for a period of time was because there was a notion that it was only fluff.
Right.
And what I think has happened is now we're layering motivation with application, and that marriage is beautiful, and it's okay to kind of combine those both and become and call yourself a motivational speaker.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Okay, so we've got 3 key ideas for you today on the show, because we're talking about how to scale your business using systems. And Kent has been kind enough to come into our school and offer us a deep dive on CRMs. And I'm super excited about that. I cannot wait, because our students are always challenged with CRMs. So let's start. We've got CRMs. We're going to talk a little bit about VAs and team. And then we're also going to talk about kind of marketing systems and video. So let's start with CRMs. Tell us, what CRM do you use and how do you use it? I always say that the CRM is only as good as its user.
Wow, that's spot on.
It sounds like you're really like using it. You don't even say, here, team, you use it and I'll just kind of know it's there. You're actually in there every single day yourself.
Correct. So CRM, so I've gone through 3. So I went with, I can't remember. It was like it started with an I, but I went with one for a while.
Infusionsoft?
No, not Confusionsoft. It was like Insightly is what it was called. I think they're still around.
Yes, they are. Yep.
But back in the day when I went with them, they had I used them, and the longer I used them, the more I had flaws. And I totally agree with you. A decent CRM that you use regularly is better than the best CRM that you never use. Right. So after using it, it just wasn't working for me. I can't even remember the reasons why. And then I went to Contactually and loved Contactually.
Okay.
And about 3 years ago, they sold it.
Oh.
And I could tell once they sold it, because I'm in there so much, I could tell, this thing's going downhill. And they sold it. I don't know if to kill it or to try to incorporate it into the rest. And so Contactually is out of business now. Okay. And so I just switched to Streak, which is a Gmail specific.
And that's really important, like knowing how your email system is going to work with, and so I'm loving that you're saying Gmail specific. And I will say, by the way, at the Wealthy Speakers School, Kent, we don't have a system that we endorse right now, because we used to endorse Karma CRM for speakers, and I have told them that we can no longer endorse you because your back end, the support was not there. My people were getting so frustrated with it. And so I hope nobody comes after me for saying that, but that was, I explained that we could no longer endorse that. So we don't have one that we're endorsing right now. And so you're on Streak. And see, that makes me think about my other app that I really love which is called Win Streak,
Oh,
which is
never heard of that.
it's like a daily affirmation app where you record what your wins are. It's just a little app on your phone, and you
Oh,
get a notice
cool.
every day at 6 o'clock. What went right today? What were your wins? And so it kind of reminds me of that. Okay, so you use Streak, and Streak plays nice in the sandbox with Gmail.
It not only plays nice in the sandbox with Gmail, you can't use it unless you're using Gmail.
Okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
it is totally, that's one of the reasons I went with them, because I've been using Gmail for so long that it's in totally it's connected with Gmail. And I will tell you this, their support is phenomenal.
Okay, that's good.
And then on top of that, all the things that you want. So for instance, I use BombBomb. Well, you can totally use that with Gmail. You're never going outside of Gmail with Streak. It is in there.
That's nice.
There is a learning curve to it, but for me, it's so worth it.
That's something I wanted to ask you. If I had a low tech emerging speaker, someone who's fairly new to the whole game of entrepreneurship, would you recommend it for them? Or do you feel like it needs to be maybe more of an intermediate, somebody who's been around the block?
If you're using Gmail, the learning curve is worth it. That's how I would say. It's
Okay, fair
totally
enough.
worth it that way.
Okay, that's good.
And let me say one thing to that, no matter what, I'm telling you, I've been doing this long enough, and I've worked with people who want to get into speaking, that if you don't, for me, if you're not using a CRM and you're not consistently, and that's the key. I always say this isn't a grind, this is gradual. You've got to be consistent.
Right.
If you're not consistently using a CRM where you can scale mail, where you're sending out lots of emails but not overburdening people, you'll never get booked. I do multiple things to get booked, but the foundation of what I do is about every 6 weeks or so, about every 6 weeks, sometimes every 8 weeks, the decision makers that I'm reaching out to get an email from me. And it's not even asking to get booked to speak. It's serving them. Yeah, adding value. And so I just keep top of mind, and you can't do that without a CRM. So this is like the foundation backbone of marketing and speaking.
I think you're going to like my idea these days that there's only two things that you need in the speaking business to be successful. Number one is 100% belief in yourself and the value that you're bringing to the table.
I agree.
And number two is consistent action. Belief and consistent action. That's all it's going to take. Well, let me just share before we move on to another idea, and I want to talk to you about every 6 weeks, you're kind of sending out value. So we do weekly, we send out every Tuesday, we send some sort of value email, something that is going to allow us to A, stay top of mind, but B, provide some value to our followers. And then every Thursday we publish a podcast, and so we announce that on an email as well. Now we use ActiveCampaign. I would also recommend, so I used to use Infusionsoft. I moved over to ActiveCampaign. I have, however, heard that Keep, which is the smaller version of Infusionsoft, not as confusing, is doing well. So some people said they like that. But ActiveCampaign is for an intermediate to seasoned person, somebody who kind of needs a little bit more robust system. And so you send out things every 6 weeks. We send them weekly, and you're going to find out what system works perfectly for you based on A, how much content can you pump out, and B, what's perfect for your audience. So I think that's up to everybody. So you're sending about...
Can I make a comment on that? Okay. So what you're doing, that's what I do on my B2C side, business to customers.
Okay.
So that's somebody who has raised their hand and says, please email me.
Right.
I want your stuff.
Yeah.
My B2B. So me as a speaker.
Separated.
Yes, absolutely. So I use Kajabi for my B2C.
Okay.
And that's a whole nother side of my business we're not even talking about.
Okay.
But for my speaking to associations, and remember, I'm that former executive director.
Right.
If you would have emailed me as an association executive director weekly, I would have, I would never book you.
Yep.
But if every 6 to 8 weeks you're giving me something of value that I can share with my team, of or I can pass on to my association members. Oh, this is a great leadership article. Oh, this is a great employee engagement article. So I on purpose don't get in front of them. I basically want to be within 3 weeks of them, 3 or 4 weeks of them making a decision about their speakers. I just want to kind of just stay in front of them.
Back to sending out the idea behind the consistency is that you are out there seed planting, sometimes 3 to 4,000 people at a time, people who are in your markets, correct?
Yeah. When you say, okay, so when you say 3 to 4,000 at a time, I would say this is across all the different markets.
Okay.
And there might be, it might be, so if it's an association that has 2 or 3 people that I'm reaching out to, those are the people. So I would say out of all the different associations I'm reaching out to, but like in the youth market, it might be a total of, I don't know, there's like 12 or 13 national organizations that all have statewide chapters that I'm reaching out to. So that would be 1,000 people I might be reaching out to in
Okay.
the youth market alone.
Fair enough.
And that's a good example of the different markets that I reach out to.
And I know the marketing's got to be different for youth than it might be for your
It
service.
is. Yep. It is. Yep.
Right? And so I think making that adjustment is important. Okay. So CRM is one important tool. The other thing about the CRM is that when you get to the point where you're booking, you should be able to go to all of the fields that you have developed inside your CRM and merge them together with an agreement, because you've taken down all of the information as you're walking through it with the client. Okay, where's it going to be held? That goes in a field in your CRM. How many people are going to be there? That's a field in your CRM. And then you're able to merge things together with a contract very, very easily.
Yeah, you can do that, or you can, again, this is how working with Gmail works, is you have a Google Drive, and so they can add all those things. So it's just, if you know that system, that's how I work it very well. They have these things called pipelines. You put them in pipelines, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. Okay. The important thing, I think, is that you're out there planting seeds on a consistent basis,
Regular
showing
basis.
them that you have value, and later, over time, the harvest is going to come. And this is how you've kept your pipeline full now for over a decade.
Right.
Talk about team. Who do you have on your team, and how do you use them?
So I on purpose I know there's some speakers out there that want to build big teams, different things like that. I really focus on getting VAs to do specific things. So again, I have 2 sides of my business. It's very different. I use more VAs on my B2C side of business than the B2B side of business.
Okay.
But I use VAs, for instance, for I've got a bookkeeper. I've got somebody who helps me with the podcast that I do. I've got VAs who are helping me find, I really use my VAs to help me find event planners. Like, I've got them out there finding event planners to where I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that kind of technical research. So those are some that I've got a VA who does all my social media stuff for me. That's not me posting personal stuff. I do post personal stuff when I'm out there speaking, things like that, but just articles. I've got a VA now. I've created enough content over the years that I've got a VA that goes into old articles that I wrote years ago, updates them.
Purpose.
Yeah, repurposes them all. And so I've got, those are how I'm using my VAs. But Most of them are literally a few hours a week. If I would go and count, I probably am using 6 different people to do all those different things, and they specialize, and then they do that. What's interesting is I've been able to connect with somebody that, in fact, that's where I get most of my VAs, and I go, hey, if I use them for this, there's multiple people I can connect you with that will use them for the exact same thing. So one of the individual that I use for social media, she's doing that for probably 6 or 7 other people, and it becomes a full-time job for her.
That's nice. I love that. I love that. Okay, so when we come to marketing systems, okay, so we've covered CRM, we've talked about team. Let's talk about marketing systems and specifically video and how you use. So BombBomb is BOMB, is that right?
Or yeah, terrible name. Yeah. They thought that up years ago, but yeah.
Catchy. I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for that, right?
Yeah. And I should say terrible name. It's just, after all the stuff that happened, I think they created themselves before some of the different stuff that happened. So
yeah, it feels violent in some way.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about how you warm up a sale using video. Tell me just your process. You've sent email number 1 that says, hey, I'm Kent Julian, and this is what I bring to the table. Is that right?
Yeah. So often what I'll do, so that's an interesting thing, and I've tried it 2 different ways. I always send out my first email and it basically says, whether you ever hire me or not. So this is what I do. I'm a speaker. This is what I speak on, but whether you ever hire me or not, I want to add value to you. And attached is an art, and it's the one article I always send. It's called 7 Surprising Questions Great Leaders Ask. This is just an example of what I do. Sometimes I send that out without a video, and sometimes I send that out with literally like a 1-minute video that just is introducing myself to them.
Let me ask you a question. Is it a link to the article or is it an attachment, a PDF?
I do it differently.
I'm thinking the video would be important if you wanted them to open a PDF, which I probably would recommend a link anyway, because you want to drive people to your website.
Right.
So, but I'm thinking the video at least would allow people to feel confident that the link you're sending isn't going to take them somewhere untoward.
Yeah, correct. And so sometimes I do it link, but usually on the first one, it's always a PDF, just so that I'm not even asking them. They can go on, if they're interested, down at the bottom of my email signature, there's a link to my website. So if they want to find out, that's where they'll go.
Okay.
But then the other 2 ways that I use videos is I actually have a strategy that I call seed planning. And I will take like a month where I go, okay, I'm going to send, these are warmer leads. I know because of my CRM, I know they've been opening my stuff. I know they're clicking on my stuff. So I'll literally send an email that will have a 1-minute personal video. And I'll do something like this where I say, hi, Jane, and I'll hold it up. Yeah. And I'll say,
no, it's like just for them.
Just for them. And I'll just reach out and I'll have a resource that I'm giving them. Hey, I hope this will will be a good resource for your team that you can pass on to your association members. By the way, if you look, and I usually spend a month when I know, because I've been in an industry long enough, I know, hey, we're about 5 to 6 months away from them booking, from their events.
Right.
So I'll say it to where I know within the next month, they're going to have conversations about who they're booking. That's great. So I do that. That's the second way I use it. The third way I use it, and this is real, this makes BombBomb worth it to me as far as what I pay for it.
Okay.
When somebody reaches out and fills out a request form to have me come in and speak, a VA will follow up if I'm on the road, but if I'm not on the road, so I probably 75% of the time I can follow up within 24 hours, and usually within 12 hours, I've got a little form email that I respond, but in that form email, is me again with a note card saying, man, thank you so much for asking me to speak, considering me to speak, would be delighted for you. And I just 30 seconds to 60 seconds, ask them if they want to set up a phone call. What's really interesting is I bet you half the time they don't even want to set up a phone call. They're just like, hey, we're ready to book you. You know, what are your fees?
I love that. And so, just for the people who are listening audio only, it could be a Post-it note. You could have a little baby whiteboard. One of my clients, Sammy Small, has a cute little whiteboard. She's always like, "Hi, Jane," and when we're getting ready to talk, so it feels personal for people.
Very much.
Know that this isn't a mass thing that's going out. I love the idea of following up when you get a warm lead with a video immediately. And so they feel like they already know, like, and trust you as soon as that's done. And you're saying that that's leading to closing deals faster.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting. Even if you pick up the phone and call them, I'm sure you've had other speakers say you've got to do that. I get so frustrated because then it will be a week worth of trying to set up a phone call. Like I'll call them immediately and they're not answering because they're in a meeting or they don't know my phone. And so this way they see me and they hear me and they see my smile, you know, within 12 hours.
And you're saying I'm in to whatever it is that
exactly.
So they know you're in, they have a verbal, yeah, I'm in. This sounds like a really good fit for me. You know, and then you could get to the discovery call and make sure that you're going to do all the things that they want you to do when you show up. So you have a system of in place, you know, you either send an audio in one of three different or a video in three different situations. This is your system. And so you've worked out and you've tested. What you're telling me is you've done A/B split testing all over the place.
Yes, yes.
Plus this to get that result. And now you know that that's the one that you're going to stick with.
Well, and not only that, so here's another thing that's really great about CRMs and why I look at a CRM as having a full-time VA. Like my CRM, for me, I like to stay involved in staying connected to the people who want to hire me.
Right.
And so one of the great things about having a CRM is you have all of these emails already, you know, when you know that they're asking this of you, boom, you got your email, you can just send it out. All you have to do is put their name in there. When they want you to send the speaking agreement, you know, once we get, yes, we're doing this, speaking agreement goes out, and then an intake form, a thing to our intake. Those are all in there. Now I have a VA that does that, this individual named Mackenzie, but if she's not there, if she can't handle that for me, or she's, you know, I send it out for her because we've already done that.
The system is there and
it's there.
If somebody leaves your business, the idea is that you or someone else can step into the system without a hiccup. This is the only way to scale. When everything depends on you and your business, you are not in a successful business.
No.
Kent, you have given us so much gold here. So 3 things to think about. Make sure that you have your CRM and that it's working for you and that you're in there every day. Make sure that you know who your team is and what all the players are going to do for you. And Kent, it sounds like you get specialists in each category.
Yeah.
Really good at social media. That will be all that they do for you. I really like that. Number 3, let's have some marketing systems like using video or BombBomb in order to touch people on a regular basis in a way that's just a little bit more meaningful than the whole, you know, back and forth over email or exchanging phone calls type situation, especially when you have a warm lead. I think these are really good takeaways for people, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And that thing about going to the specialist, I learned that from trying to hire one person
for everything.
Yeah, for multiple times. I tried it I know for sure 2, maybe even 3 times. And it just wasn't, they would do one thing well, but they wouldn't, or 2 things well, but they wouldn't do the other things well.
And we've had the team meeting where we've said, okay, everybody, you need to tell me what things are your sweet spot and what things are you going to avoid at any cost. And we're going to move them from your list over to somebody else who's really good at that. And I love that we have all of our players playing in their areas of genius.
Yeah, exactly.
I think trying to hire it all for one thing is very difficult. Kent, if people want to get to know a little bit more about you, tell me a little bit more about your B2C operation. What are you doing over there? What are you offering to people, and what's the URL for people to maybe check you out there?
Yeah, so the best place they can find out, I talk a lot about being a speaker. So I have a podcast called Paid to Speak Podcast. So if they'll Google paidtospeakpodcast.com, it's a really small scale thing. It's something I just do on the side. It's kind of my little side hustle thing. So it's called paidtospeakpodcast.com. And if they want one of our, what I would call our primary resources, called paidtospeakpodcast.com/9 ways. I wrote a little article about 9 different ways you can get paid to speak, because a lot of people think about, you got to do what I do, which is a keynoter or a trainer. And there's so many different ways. And when I say get paid to speak, it's not do this and just back of the room sales. It's like somebody's actually giving you a check. And so if they want that, that's paidtospeakpodcast.com/9 ways.
Beautiful. And I'm just going to raise my hand here. Maybe I could be on your podcast sometime.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I need to do that. I never do guests right now.
All right.
Because it's literally, oh, I've got an idea and I talk about it for 10 minutes.
Okay. Well,
but I do need to get guests.
I'm planting the seed.
I hear you. In
the Paid to Speak podcast. Well, listen, thank you, Kent, so much for your time today. I've absolutely loved catching up with you. I'm so excited for you to offer up some content to our school. And for those of you listening in, thank you so much for tuning in and continuing to tune in with us week after week after week. We really appreciate you. And with that, we'll say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Take care.